Oh, great. So some people are coming in. Fantastic. And Monica and Kat and Jess, can you also see the attendees list? Okay, great. Wonderful. Okay, so some people are coming in. We'll wait maybe a minute and get started. But in the meantime, I'll welcome those who are here so far. So welcome to our event. We're almost at the end of Women's History Month, although stay tuned for a bunch of events we have in April too, which are, unofficially Women's History Month. We need more than 1 month anyway, don't we? But today we're going to be talking about making Medea with Kat Caro and Monica Flory and Jessica Noel. So we have a number of people here in the audience, I think some students, and as well as there's a couple, I think maybe some faculty and staff, and I know we have some friends of the panelists. So I'll start off also by saying for those who are here that I feel really fortunate that I was able to invite these 3 amazing women to come today to have this talk. They are not strangers to me. They are my friends, and I'm really glad that they're here. So I want to start off with, we're now at 11:22. I want to start off with, if you could each tell us a little bit about yourselves. So what you do, whatever you'd like to share about your professional or your personal life. And in particular, I was thinking, because we're here to talk about gender studies, about how so many women work in environments that are either male dominated or the leadership and those who hold power in the organizations are men. And I think it's true for you, most of what you do is different than that. So if you could tell us about your experiences in particular as professional women. Kat, would you like to start first?
Sure. My name is Kat Caro. I'm the production designer at Philly Pack and for Humble Materials. I am a wife and a mother. I have 2 sons. And my career has been kind of dictated by my kids mostly. I feel like I went to school I had formal training in art and biology, but I was a biology major. But once I had Gideon, I was pretty young out of school. So I stayed home with him and I sort of followed him through things and took opportunities. I became a freelance artist and I taught classes at Fleischer, and I've sort of bounced around a lot. And I stumbled upon Jess and Pack when Gideon was old enough to join. And I kind of got pulled in and we started working together. And I think the best way that I can explain working at Pack is that very early on in our working relationship, I needed to build something big and I wasn't sure how to do it. So we had a guy that could help maybe. And I took a meeting with him and I said, like, here are my thoughts. Like, do you think, because I was looking at carpentry, I needed carpentry done. And Jess knows the story. And very quickly, he told me that he could absolutely help, sweetheart, and he could make all of my dreams come true. And he was going to handle it and don't worry about it. And it's great, and like not long after that, I went back to Jess and I said, you know what, I think I can figure it out. Like, I think I can handle it. And Jess was like, great, even better. And that's sort of how we've done everything. It's always just been, let's figure it out together. And, not that we exclude help from anyone. We've had lots and lots of people help and collaborate, but it's always been, let's just do it. Let's just figure it out. And there's never been that overbearing sort of energy in the group ever. So it's been wonderful. Yeah, I think that's me. I think that's my story.
Okay, Jess, can you go next? And I know that Kat mentioned a couple of things that you can clarify too about Philly Pack, because we haven't talked about that yet. And I know too that Kat mentioned having taught at Fleischer. So for those of you who are not in the Philadelphia or South Philadelphia area, Fleischer Art Memorial is a place where there's a lot of programming classes for kids and for adults. And I actually take pottery there, starts tomorrow. So it's a great resource in the neighborhood. Okay, Jess.
Hello, my name is Jess, and I'm the owner and director of Philly Pack, which started as an education program almost 12 years ago. But now we've grown into sort of like this community center where we have like a huge, robust theater and dance education program that I'm so proud of and is 100% my heart. But now the space, which I'm in right now, operates as sort of a community center. We have all different types of events here. We had a film screening here this past weekend. Different theater companies use the space for rehearsals, dance companies use the space, artists use the space to show their work. And it's really a dream come true that PAC is so much more than theater and dance education now. It's really become sort of a staple in the community for just artistic magic making. And I'm really proud of that. I have a son, an 11-year-old, almost 12-year-old, and I have a husband who's on faculty at Temple. And I guess what I can say about us being a team of women or non-binary is for me personally, I prefer to be surrounded in that capacity. I prefer to work with women and non-binary artists. And I just love it so much. I love the team that we've cultivated over the years. I love working with Kat and Monica in this way. It's the best. It's the best.
Great, thank you. Okay, Monica.
Hello, hi, I'm Monica Flory, and I am a freelance playwright and director and educator, and I also am education director at Philly Pack, and I have 2 kids who are 9 and 12, and a partner who works in technology, but also has an artistic soul, and is an artist as well. And I get to work in lots of different situations throughout the year. So I do a lot of writing on commission. So there's a lot of circumstances in which I work for a company and send out a play and may or may not get to see the play. And other situations where I direct where I work with all genders of people. And I think I always really appreciate the dynamic that we have together at PAC. I mean, sort of what Jess talks about, like the way that artistic magic making happens there is really unique. And when I hear other people talk about their work situations, I realize that we don't have that gender dynamic. And I think particularly in a field where we do have to assume an authority as directors, as designers, it's an incredible luxury not to have a power dynamic that's dominated by gender. Is that the way I want to say it? That has gender as a strong piece of that dynamic is really a luxury and a gift.
Thank you. I feel like because everybody said a little bit about their personal and professional life, that I'll also introduce myself. I think some of the people here should know me anyway, but so I'm Joan Mazelis. I'm an associate professor of sociology at Rutgers Camden in the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminal Justice. And I am the director of gender studies. And part of how we are all connected is that we are friends. And I also have 12-year-old twins, and you might have caught that the others also have kids around the same age. So we have been in the same kind of orbits, either with our kids at the same schools or doing the same activities, including at Philly Pack, for many years. Okay, so can you tell us about Humble Materials? Because we talked a little about Philly Pack. Tell us about Humble Materials. What is it? How did it get started?
I'll start, I guess. Okay, so in September, we produced a Friends show and we asked 13 of our friends if they wanted to contribute generated material for our Friends show. So it was like this big collaboration. And we realized in September that the time was now to launch our adult company, which has been a dream in the making for years, but the timing hadn't quite been right. And just seeing all of our friends come out and generate such beautiful work in September, I mean, it was so obvious that it was time to branch in that direction. And we make theater with young people, and we have been doing that for 12 years. So to be able to make theater with adults and for adults is so stimulating in a new way. And so that's sort of how Humble Materials came about. And the name Humble Materials is a quote from Monica. We were at the film screening of their short film. Kat and Monica made a short film called Because of Dragons over a pandemic. And Monica was talking about Kat's work, and Monica said, Kat works with such humble materials. And it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, Monica, that is totally the name of our theater company, because that's what we are. We are Humble Materials. We don't have a huge budget. We will never have a huge budget. It's just like not the way that we work. But we kind of don't care that we don't have a huge budget, because we can make magic with hardly any money at all. So yeah.
Okay, that's great. So it's the adult sort of arm in that way. You think of it as a Philly Pack. And so Monica and Kat, you're involved in Humble Materials as well. And you'd mentioned some other people before too, Jess. I don't know if you want to say anything about the other members of Humble Materials. You can do that now if you'd like.
Yeah, shout out to Chachi Perez, Lisa Vaccarelli, Amy Henderson, Anna Betteridge, Lauren Leonard, Carolyn Breyer, Matt Subitz, John Noel, Natalie Surich. There's so many people. I'm leaving people out.
Kish Bolden.
We are surrounded by a group of friends that if you say like, hey, I want to do this theater project, our friends are like, yeah, we're in. So it just seemed very natural that these collaborations and friendships become a company.
Yeah. And this includes people who have like theater backgrounds and people who are dancers and people who are musicians and artists and other ways. And yeah. Okay. So who had the idea to do Medea? What was it about Medea that inspired you? And can you tell us a bit about the story for anybody on the call who might not be familiar?
Monica should definitely talk about the story because I feel like Monica would really nail it. But when Joni asked where did the idea come from, I was like head scratching for a second, like where did the idea come from? And then I realized that the last show I had seen in New York was an adaptation of Medea. I saw it at BAM on February 28th. And it was written and directed by Simon Stone. And it was a super haunting production. Medea and Jason were played by husband and wife, Rose Byrne and Bobby Cannavale. And they were incredible. They were electric on stage. But I can remember leaving the theater and thinking, what would an adaptation of Medea be like written and directed by a woman? And yeah, so that sort of seed was planted and haunted me for the 2 years that theaters were closed. Yeah.
Monica, do you want to tell us more?
Sure. Yeah. So this production riffed on the Euripides play, Medea. And so we took that basic structure of the story about a woman who, Medea is a witch. she's magic. She helps her husband Jason get the golden fleece, and there are all these ways in which she bolsters him and his career and his adventures. And then he betrays her by falling in love with another woman. And in her rage, in the original myth, she kills him and his lover and their children. And so we definitely wanted to start with that basic story. Of course, there are also there are many versions of the Medea myth. In one of them, she has 3 children, and one of them she has 2 children. We opted for the 3-child version, but then really put our own spin on it. For example, in the Euripides play, Medea never interacts with Jason's lover. And we were like, well, we really want that scene to happen. What will happen in that scene? So we did take a ton of liberty. And I think one of sort of my impetus in adapting the story as the writer was sort of what are all the things that mothers can't say? And let's say them and free up our daughters and free up our sons and our non-binary kids to be able to keep having that conversation. Let's not pretend that motherhood is just this one thing and that we all experience it in the same way at all times. Let's say all those things and put them out in the open.
Wow. Okay. That's really great. I should also say too, if anybody has questions at any point, you can feel free to put them in the Q&A, and I promise we will get to them. We might wait till to the end to do that, but if anything that you're hearing is inspiring some questions, please feel free to put that in the Q&A. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the process of making Medea and your vision for it, and also just sort of what the process looked like what happened first? Did you write it first, or did you get together the people that you knew would be in it and talk to them about what you wanted it to look like? Or did you do production design first? How did all the pieces kind of fit together? You're all looking at each other.
Monica, you, me, all of these questions could be answered by all of us. But I think first, Monica and I were we're adapting Medea. That's what we're doing. And then second, I was I'm playing Medea. And Monica was yeah. And then third was Kat, we're doing Medea. And Kat was yeah. So that's sort of how it went. And I knew that Monica, not Medea. I knew that Monica loves to adapt Greek theater. That's one of Monica's probably favorite things to do. And I knew that. And so I knew that it was a no-brainer when I said hey, Monica, we're adapting Medea. I knew that Mon was going to be yeah. And so, and yeah, yeah. Anyone else?
I can pick up that we also knew most of the company of people who was going to be involved with the show. So sort of as we were writing, things shifted a little bit over time, but what a joy to know that I was writing Medea and I was writing it for Jess to play Medea. I might have written it differently if it wasn't Jess, because I know that she will go there 100%. So our Medea could get real weird and dark and scary and funny. Jess is also so funny on stage that was a really big part of it too, that we can handle some really dark humor in there as well. So we knew, so that was a joy knowing most of the performers who were going to be involved when we started was a big part of the process. Kat, do you want to talk about how design then came to be?
Yeah, I mean, I feel you already get a sense of there's this sort of organic making that happens when we all talk. And there are so many decisions that I realize now were huge, but I don't really even remember exactly when they happened. But I know there was this sort of anachronism written. There were a lot of moments in the play that it's very Greek, and we're talking about the kingdom and the king. But then Monica did this great thing where she wrote in, these little very modern references to things like Legos and stuff. So early on, it kind of got pulled out of time completely. And because we're always working in such a small space with not much going on, like we kind of had a blank slate, and masks came in very early because we wanted the chorus to also play these additional characters. And the idea that we needed, you know, Jason, we needed the king, and we knew who our actors were. So that was an opportunity to go very Greek, you know, in sort of a half mask with a expression baked in, but do it in a sort of strange way that was humble, I guess, right? Because nothing was sculpted. Jason's the sculptor, and we were telling the story of these two artists. So we wanted to sort of reference all of these things, but keep it sort of unexpected. And also COVID was an issue when we were trying to figure it out, because our performers had, you know, masks while they were rehearsing, and we kind of had to work around a lot of things, and we wanted them to be able to breathe. But I made the masks for the chorus members to become the characters, and then all of the rest of the design just sort of became about stripping things away, telling the story very minimally. One of my favorite things was the coveralls, because I just love the idea of pulling even sort of, you know, gender and body shape away and letting these performers tell a story in a really intense way, right? I feel like it became sort of the whole visual of very little happening except for in their faces was amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I realized as Kat was talking, it was time to pull up some images. So I've been showing some images of masks so you can see how they were also, I mean, on the stage right there, and then the performers would take them when needed, but you can also see people wearing them. And here's the baby, who you said is Bean, baby, and that's Amy, right? So these are some images. If you were not at the show, you've missed out. I'm sorry to say, but but it was really great. And I'm glad we have these images to share for those here who did not see it, just so that you can understand what we're talking about with the masks and with the coveralls. Yeah, Kat, you were going to say something else.
Oh, just that we had this great framework that most of the action was happening in an artist's studio. So it was sort of industrial and timeless in that way too. But yeah, we had like no colors except for eventually we had red, which was also really great.
Right. The red with lighting.
Red.
And then do we have a picture of the end? I don't know if we do.
I think there's one.
I don't know if we got any blood splatter pics in this collection.
I don't think so.
You'll just have to follow us on Instagram.
And they should follow, they can follow Humble Materials, right?
At Humble Materials, all one word, on Instagram. There's photos up there.
Okay. Okay, so I wanted to say that having seen the show, like I saw so much that was compelling in the show in terms of like what literally happens, right? Wanting to see how it's going to unfold, but also how obviously it's a metaphor for motherhood and all the pressures that mothers face, right? So Medea, as you've said, is a bad mother, in quotes, right? Bad mother, in such a fundamental way. But I'd love to talk about how all of you feel about what it means to be a mother, a good mother, a bad mother, and how you saw this show as a vehicle to explore those themes about motherhood. And whoever would like to go first can go first.
I'll talk about my quest in motherhood is a balancing act. I'm always trying to get the balance between work and mothering. And that's like my constant journey, I think, in my life, is making sure that my needs are met by feeding this compulsion that I have to make art. And then also that another of my needs is met by having this relationship with my child, and that relationship that I have with him also feeds me. So I I am able to feel when I'm out of balance. Like if I'm working too much and I haven't seen my kid in a while, it hurts me. I can feel that I'm out of whack. And in the same way, like if I'm hanging out with my kid too much and I haven't made anything lately, like that hurts me also. So for me, it's all about the balance. And I think with our Medea, she was out of balance. She was an artist. Specifically, she was a muralist. We took the inspiration for her art from my sister, who's a muralist in Portland, Oregon. Her name is Natalie Fletcher, and she was the inspiration for this big art that lived inside Medea's brain. And then after Medea had kids, she stopped making work. And so her balance was out of whack. And so we told the most extreme version of like unbalanced mom.
Kat, Monica?
I feel like one of the best parts of working at PAC and with these women and with our company is that there are other mothers. And because we work with kids, you know, our kids have also been, you know, around us a lot and get pulled sometimes, you know, into productions, and they help out. Singer Noel was running the lights for this show. My son Gideon has done music for other shows. So we live in this sort of like really wonderful bubble where we get to, you know, have a little bit more balance, I think, than if we were, you know, working anywhere else. But it's amazing to be in this community and have, you know, watch this show with other women, and you relate to Medea no matter how much you want to admit that you do. Like there is a frustration, and there's a line. I mean, all of the, I wish everyone could just read it all the time because it's so beautifully written, Monica. But you know, there's this idea with when she's nursing where, you know, the milk is the life and you either keep it or you give it away. And I think it's such an essential struggle to find time for everything, because it just doesn't exist. Like there's not enough time. So whatever we're doing, we're always trying to pull everything in at the same time, and it doesn't ever really work, but also it also kind of works. So it's a balancing act for sure. But you know, I love the idea of Greek tragedy as like, you know, worst case scenario, like Jess said, this is when the balance is completely gone. And particularly, I think in light of COVID, you know, we all are in this space of trying to find balance again, and it's nearly impossible still. But we've spent a lot of time with our kids and, you know, without our kids, and trying to figure it all out is, you know, it's tough. It's tough. So I think it was cathartic in that way to see this and experience it and also recognize it. Yeah.
Monica?
Yeah, I mean, I think I resonate so much with what both of you just said. And I think that for mothers around our time that we have children, like the loss of agency when we had children was, or I'll speak for myself, I had children in my 30s, and the loss of agency of being this career person and artist, and then suddenly life just changing so dramatically in a way that I hadn't expected. And as many people had told me that things were going to change like this, I couldn't have imagined it. And I think that being able to sort of go to that extreme on stage was really very cathartic, very and a lot of moms that I talked to after the show said, oh, that line, milk is the life force, either you keep it for yourself or you give it away, right? That feels true sometimes, right? Either you have your own, you know, your agency or you don't. And as a mother, you're going back and forth all the time between having it and not. So there's a monologue in this version where I think, Kat, you were just talking about this too, where Medea's nursing the baby and is telling her, don't have children, like don't marry, like bind yourself to your community, bind yourself to your work, don't bind yourself to a man and have children. And of course, I'm so happy I had children. I mean, it is the most wonderful part of my life. You know, my sister read the play and she was like, did your husband read this? Are your children going to see this show? And it's certainly nothing about how happy I am for having made those choices, but it's dramatic. And I think it's gotten extra dramatic in this time of COVID. Big feelings about motherhood.
And I think there's like a universality in that too, that part of why I relate to it is as an academic, and I think it's really similar for artists actually, that sometimes we're told by other women who are maybe more senior to us, like, if you really want to do this, if you really want to make this work, you're going to have to make a choice. And so there was a time, so I'm 47. I also had children in my 30s. And when I was in graduate school, I didn't see a lot of models of women who were successful professors who had children. When they did, maybe they had had one child much later in life after they got tenure or something, or they had a partner who was the primary caretaker of their kids. But otherwise it seemed like, you know, the sort of myth of having it all, right? We're in the 21st century, we should be able to do this. That even people who have economic means to hire nannies or to send their kids to full-time daycare, right? That it doesn't mean that there isn't this sort of like emotional pull, right? And so I think I related to that as an academic and constantly on writing deadlines, and that I have research that's ongoing and teaching and all the other kinds of things that I have to do. But the kids need me for other things that are super important to them, and to be present for them in that way. And of course I have a partner too. And so there are things that I want to be able to provide to him that require sort of me to be fully present on the weekends and evenings, but sometimes that's not how the academic calendar always works, right? So sometimes I've heard of it too, that we shouldn't talk about it as a balance, because there is no balance, right? I mean, like when do we ever feel like, oh, it's exactly right? You know, it's more like, if we're really present with our kids, we think like we're shortchanging our work. Or if we're doing a great job at work, we think, when was the last time I saw my children? And so a lot of women struggle with the sort of like, am I failing in my career, or am I failing as a mom? Because it's so hard to get that balance. So that instead of balance, it should be about like integration. I think that's what something that Kat said, right? Like we only have one life. Like if you make a to-do list for what you have to do that week, it's the same week. It's the same number of hours. You can't say like, oh, this is my work list and this is my kid list, right? But it's so hard. It's so hard. And yeah. So I felt that was very resonant as well, which is why it's so interesting that even though in the show, Medea is an artist. I mean, she could have had any career, right? But that she felt the pressure to kind of put a pin in that and be a mom, and sort of let that other part of herself go. And I want to say too, just, you know, like shout out to the moms who are doing the full-time mom thing, who do put a pin in the career, because that is incredibly difficult. And there's a lot of language in our culture about like being just a mom, as if it's not enough, and as if women who are making those decisions aren't also feeling the conflicts that creates. So it's hard to be a woman and a mom and a professional to do it all. Okay, so for Jess, as I told you right after the show, I'll tell everybody now in case anyone didn't know this, right after the show, I went up to Jess and I said, you were a revelation. How did you manage to capture Medea's competing and contradictory facets, right? So she has this rage and madness, and but also this vulnerability. And also for Jess and for Monica, how did you manage to make the audience have like sympathy for Medea and empathy for Medea, even in the final moments of the show when she does this really unthinkable thing?
I'll start, I guess. It was really easy to find Medea. For the first reason is because I was surrounded by friends who love me and were like, go there, go there, go there. And like Monica, as our director, would tell me like, go further, go further, go further. And I trust Kat and Monica and the rest of the company. Like, I trust them with my life. Like, I know that if Monica says to go further, then I need to go further. So it was a really safe space when I was finding her. And then another thing is that I think Madea is a really lovable character, but hear me out. I think that rage that lives in Madea lives in everyone. Every day we get filled up with like all this rage, and especially right now, like with pandemic and Black Lives Matter and the war in Ukraine. And it's just like, we are just filled with rage every day. And the cool thing about playing Medea was I got to purge that on stage. And then, I mean, I would walk home every night just feeling really light as a feather and just like feeling really at peace because I got to go there on stage. So it's really fun to play Medea. And when you see a show, a production of Medea, and you're an actor, particularly a female actor, like you want to play that part. Like she's the part that actors want to play because she is so angry and she's so gross, but the audience sees themselves in her. She is a very sympathetic character. And yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the ending on trying to figure out how, like, what do we want to say at the end of the show? We were really not interested. Well, for one thing, we were never interested in having Medea's children portrayed as by children. We were never interested in some kind of horrific ending where we've like met these beautiful young people and then we know that this character has off them. That sounded terrible. We didn't want that. We sort of wanted the focus to remain on her, and we decided collectively that the ending was going to be about life goes on. Like this horrible thing has happened. The very end of the play is Medea comes out again and is there with the community, with the chorus community, and the baby starts crying. So we've had the baby, Bean, which is a masked lump of fabric, and oh, Bean's coming, great. And so the baby cries and the chorus and the nurse hand over the baby to Medea so that she can nurse. And we were sort of like, yay, there's baby Bean. That felt to us like that's part of the feeling of being a mother. Like the baby's always got to be nursed. It doesn't matter what just happened. Like the baby's hungry, the baby needs to eat. And it was interesting. It was really interesting creating this story as a mom, because of course, one of the things we fear most is anything happening to our children at any time is the most horrific thing we can imagine. I'll speak for myself. It's the most horrific thing I can imagine. And I have to say, I didn't really go there for a while with this play until Kat made the blood stains on the coveralls. So basically Medea leaves in this red light. There's a lot of chaos. There's this amazing dance movement piece that Jess choreographed and the ensemble created. And she leaves with the hammer. And then she comes back in and the coveralls were bloody. How do I explain this, Kat? They were bloody, like low on the coveralls, right? So thinking about the height of a young child, and that like it really hit me like, oh, we really are trying to tell the most horrific story about our absolute greatest fears, both about our fears about anything happening to our children and our fears about that our own rage is really so much bigger than we think it is. And that is the moment that it occurred to me. I'm so sorry that we don't have a photo. Maybe Kat, you can say more about the coveralls and explain it better than I just did.
Yeah, it's funny because I think we actually all had that same moment independently. And because we work all the time in this white box theater, especially with children, we were really excited about working with blood. Like it was just this very like theater making, but oh, blood, And when I took the coveralls to Bloody at home and I put him in my tub, and I sort of started to think about, blood spatter and where it would be and what hand, Jess uses. And literally as soon as I did that, it was troublesome. Like it bothered me a lot. And I sent the pictures to Jess and Monica, and I think I even sent them independently, and everyone had the same reaction. It was like, oh, like, yeah, it's good, but also, oh, because it just is, it's visceral, it's blood, right? You always have that same reaction no matter what. And trying to be intentional, even when everything else is so a little bit abstract, I think it felt very real compared to, like, look at Bean, she's just like fabric. So suddenly we have blood, and it made it real, I Bean, in a very powerful way. And I think that we need it at the end, but it also sort of, it bothered all of us in the same way.
Yeah, I was just finding a picture that I was going to pull up, but while I finish getting that, I just want to say we do have just a comment in the Q&A from Gina Senior. Just re-listened to Beloved, read by Toni Morrison, and she goes into such beautiful detail about nursing after murdering her child, blood and milk. So is that an inspiration as well? Were you thinking about Toni Morrison's work at all, Monica?
No, I did not make that connection. I'm so glad that Gina did. That's a beautiful connection. I do love Toni Morrison and love Beloved, but I didn't make a conscious connection there.
And love Gina. Shout out to Gina. Hi there.
So I do have a picture I can pull up. Let's see if it's going to let me.
Ooh, this is going to be great.
Sorry, I'm working on it still. Here, in the meantime, I'm going to go to my next question. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about gender and gender identity and gender expression. So all the performers, as Jess mentioned before, are women or are non-binary, but there are male characters, and gender disparities and different kinds of expectations for men and women that are key themes of the show. So how did you all navigate that as a performer, as a director, as a designer? And maybe Kat, maybe you can explain a little bit about the masks that you made and how they helped to embody different people playing different roles of different genders.
Sure. I think, there was a very straightforward need to just sort of try to convey quickly who this character was, because we had, a young woman, an older woman, a young man, and an older man. So I was hoping to translate that sort of quickly. And like I said, they all sort of had, a baked in expression. Like I gave them eyebrows. The nurse was very sympathetic, and Jason had angry eyebrows. He's sort of, we needed a little bit more arrogance. Anna was amazing with physically portraying the whole character, but the mask sort of helped give a little bit of an angry look. And for the king, he was balding and sort of exasperated and annoyed and kind of just looked done with everything. So that was as far as the masks took it, but it was absolutely physical performances that sold the characters, and the actors were incredible at portraying all of them.
Anna Betteridge was talking about portraying both Jason and then also the chorus role that they took on. And Anna said the cool thing about this show was that they got to play a man, and then Anna felt that their chorus role was a femme character. And so Anna said that in one show, they were portraying a man and a woman, and that artistically, that was a really cool experience for Anna. And that is credit to Monica writing those chorus roles that were incredible.
I think it's really fun too, the way the physicality of the performers came together with the music that Jess and John and Matt wrote together. We had a very cool bass and cello setup. So when, for example, when Jason came on, it was like this, I'm gonna not do it justice, but it was something like ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. So the way that's not at all what it sounded like, but just imagine that, but way better. That sort of informed the way that the character of Jason, the way that Anna built that character, and then to be able to layer on the mask and layer on the music was such a cool thing to watch and be a part of as a director. And in the way that gender is very performative, so it is really interesting. Oh, there it is. Yeah. It is really interesting with different genders of characters. Yes.
I just pulled it from my own photos and just emailed it to myself so I could pull it up. So it's probably not the best of all of the ones that there could be, but I wanted to show something with the blood. Yeah. But sorry, go ahead.
That's all I had to say about gender in that moment.
Okay, well then also on the subject of gender identity and gender expression, obviously you're all also involved in Philly PAC, as we talked about, which is the Philly Performing Arts Center for Kids. And I was gonna say, I thought it was like not quite 12, I was gonna say 10 years, but it's almost 12 years old now, as Jess said. My own kids have been doing it for about 8 years, I think. So I was curious to hear your perspectives as people who work with kids. How have your students' ideas about gender changed over the years? And how have their new ways of talking about and expressing gender pushed your own thinking and your art?
Monica and Kat will be more eloquent at answering this question. I know, yes, you will. But I just want to say that what I'm seeing, is particularly with our teenagers right now, is a claiming of personhood and a resisting of labels. So I'm seeing a lot of do not label me as a man, do not label me as a woman. I am a person and I'm claiming my personhood. So that is really awesome to sit in with them because there's like a lot of magic and power there. And I tell Monica all the time, because Monica and I are in the classroom together. I'm not in the classroom with Kat. Kat is in a different classroom, but I'm in the classroom with Monica. And I always say to Monica, like, I don't know what it is, but it's powerful and I don't understand it, but I'm here for it. So what I mean is like, we are sitting in something that's new. There is a new claiming of personhood that's happening. And I'm not going to pretend that I know what, that I understand all the intricacies of that, but I'm here for it.
I feel like, yeah, we have a lot of kids who, I think it's a testament to the community at PAC that we have kids who feel very comfortable telling us how they identify. I know that we've even had kids who felt more comfortable sharing that with us than they did with their own families, or it was a step, in their process. And I feel like it's so amazing to just let children explore who they are without an expectation of what that means, because we've had kids who say, I identify this way now. And then time passes and they come again and they say, now I identify this way, and they feel safe enough to change it. And the answer is always wonderful, great, and we've even had, a lot of roles that, we don't have an expectation of gender when we cast. So I think it creates even more safety in just exploring, which is what theater is about anyway. So I feel like we're always at the forefront of what kids are like trying out, because like these are kids who know how to express themselves anyway. And theater is always really, really, really wonderful for kids, no matter where they wind up in life, because they learn how to express themselves or feel comfortable in front of a group or sharing. And these kids are always at the top of that spectrum in my brain. Like they're just ready to share who they are. And all we have to do is listen and learn from them, which is what we keep trying to do. But it's a safe space, and they need to have those safe spaces, I think.
Yeah, I think that it matters a lot that we have non-binary teachers, for one thing, as incredible role models. I think it matters a lot that we are always learning from them, in that like it's truly so amazing to see how flexible young people are with each other, right? Like, oh, you're using different pronouns. Oh, you want a different preferred name? Okay, no problem. They make the switch like this, which is so inspiring. And I know that it might take a little more time for us, having grown up in a different, different way of being and way of thinking about gender. And I love watching them and learning from them and seeing how they do it. And it's also really, it's incredible, a theater as a place to think about gender, because for example, like now when I'm writing, I'm always thinking like, oh, are there any characters in this play that must be male or female or any gender? Or is it a script in which almost everybody I can use they them pronouns just in the stage directions, because it could be played by a person of any gender. And I think that's been like a huge change in my awareness in the last couple of years. And even as Kat was talking about in casting too, right? That there used to be, when I grew up in theater as a young person doing theater, there were always many people who identify as girls. And then there were like a few people who identify male, and then like girls played male roles, because there were always, the plays had many more male roles, and then those were like the lesser roles, right? If you were like a female cast in a male role, not that was the lesser role, but it was sort of it was like a little bit of a put down. You wanted to be like the ingenue, or like the female identifying role. And so for one thing, I find it incredibly inspiring that I don't think that the young people that we work with think about gender and roles in that way at all. It's not part of their experience. And I love that so much. And I'm so inspired by them, and just trying to learn from them and take cues from them, as always, pretty much about everything.
I find all those answers really great. I mean, I think it's really interesting too, as Kat said, that this is theater. So of course, trying on different roles and trying things out. I've had a lot of people, I'm sure you've all heard this too, and maybe some people on the call too have heard this, that people wonder when kids are playing around with pronouns or want to change their names, like, oh, but what if it's a phase? And like, what if it is a phase? Like, that's okay, right? And so theater kind of prepares them for that, because you play a role for a brief time and then you move on to something else. And so being able to feel safe to sort of try something on is what PAC actually provides for them. But I think it's really interesting too to think about, like, as Monica, as you were saying, how it pushed your thinking, like if you're writing stage directions, or if you're thinking about casting, that maybe you think about it differently than you did 15 years ago, right? And I was thinking about that for my own work too. There's been these academic conventions over time, right? That it always used to be he and him, like the standard, right? Like mankind, like, and it's not meant to be offensive. That's just the terminology of the time. And then there was a real push against that, right? Like, let's say she and her as the default sometimes, or let's mix it up. So sometimes you say she and sometimes you say he. And I find now, because I have the permission, the freedom to just say they, whether I'm talking about one person or multiple people, it actually has made my academic writing simpler, right? So it actually has achieved some other goals that academics are always trying to get to, right? Like, how can you write more simply and more accessibly, that we can sort of take a page from what young people are doing and actually apply it in our own ways. So I think that's been really interesting to me, to see how that's happened. We only have a few minutes left. Do we have any people who would like to ask some other questions? I will also say, while people are maybe typing things or thinking about it, that I also really appreciated what Gina had to say. Beloved was like my favorite book. I read that in high school, and it really got me thinking about magic realism, the work of Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Toni Morrison. And it's such an interesting, not everything has to be literal, right? But it can be, but it can also have these other kind of metaphorical meanings.
I also want to give a quick shout out to my son, Gideon, who is a student teacher at PAC. And I feel like we keep talking about the energy, you know, of the staff, and he is male identifying. But, you know, he comes from this world. And so he's absolutely wonderful. And there is nothing about him that, I mean, I think he's great. It's great to have a male teacher. But he's not overbearing or anything, any of the things that we associate with having, I don't know, any of the negative things that I think we were saying earlier. I want to make sure I mention that he's there.
Thank you for that. Yes. And I know also that earlier Jess mentioned a couple of men who are in Humboldt Materials as well, doing music. And so there are, it's not excluding men in any way. And men are part of all of our orbits, and we love them too. I just put a link in the chat to our next event for gender studies, and one that I'm sure a lot of people here will be interested in, talking about orbits. In the same orbit, we have next Wednesday, a week from today, but in the evening, 6 p.m., we have an event called Quiet Boy, Confronting Masculinity on Canvas. And I just shared a link, but I will also show you what this looks like. On this page, this one requires pre-registration. So there's a little description of what we're going to be doing, and then you can register and you'll get the Zoom link so that you can attend it. And this is going to be a conversation, again, a little bit like this one, between me and painter Elizabeth Berglund, who happens to be friends with all of us and I think is on this call too. So I think, again, we'll find people in the community who will be interested, but I also think it'll be an interesting topic for those of you who are Rutgers students. If you're thinking about these sort of issues of gender and masculinity, I think this explores that as well. Elizabeth's new solo exhibition at Hotbed Philadelphia is really all about exploring masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? What are the pressures that men face? And how masculinity and patriarchy is not great for women, but it's not so great for men either. And so I hope that I'll see many of you there next Wednesday as well. We also have other events coming up the next few Wednesdays after that too. So we've got a full slate of fun events for the rest of the semester. Some of them are in person and some are on Zoom. So that's all I had. Any other comments or questions? Anyone in the audience? Jess, Kat, Monica, anything else you wanted to say?
Thank you for having us, Joni. This is so great to have a chance to discuss all these things with you. This has been really fun.
Yeah,
It's
to get to talk. Yeah.
We have to give a shout out to Caroline Tiger, who's another friend of ours who had the big idea for it. She was messaging me and Monica, and she said, "Oh, I really wish somebody would, have you on a podcast or something." And I said, how about a little panel for gender studies? So thanks to gender studies also for making this possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. The recording will be available soon enough. If you know people who missed it and would like to be able to see the event, just shoot me an email. It's my last name, Mazelis, at camden.rutgers.edu. And come check out Quiet Boy next week.
Bye.
Hey, Rob, if you're able to promote Amy or Anna to panelists and they could join, I don't know if you can do that.
Yep.
Just we can say hi if you want to.
Yep, I promoted.
Thank you.
Amy and Anna are here.
I was going to invite Elizabeth to join us too, but she obviously had to leave. Hi, Anna. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Anna. Hi, Amy.
Anna.
Thanks for coming. And it's like, what's going on?
Joni, thank you so much. It was really cool to be able to talk about the show and the company. Thank you.
This is great.
Yeah, sure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for taking the time. Rob, I think we can stop recording. If we have to leave the meeting for that to happen, that's fine too.